Hello, my name is Rivki Ross. I'm the head of school at Yeshiva.wmv Montessori, where some of the most groundbreaking Jewish education of the 21st century is happening right now. I'd like to share with you some of the wonderful things that happen in this innovative method and why we believe that following Montessori as Jewish educators is something that truly gives our children an experience that exemplifies the pasuk Chanoch Lana'ar al pi darko, educate each child according to his or her path. We interpret this in two ways. One, to mean that we educate children in the way that makes sense for children, al pi darko, the way of a child, and we give them all kinds of freedoms and the ability to move and the ability to explore and everything developmentally appropriate to reach their next milestone. And in that way, we feel that we're educating them al pi darko, according to a child's way. Chanoch Lanar al pi darko would mean very specifically for each child, educating that child according to his or her path. And so one of the things that a Montessori education can provide for a child is differentiated instruction. This is a hot topic in education generally in the world, but something that is inherent in Montessori. All of the children are moving about freely in the classroom and choosing the materials that speak to them in that given moment in their development. And so it's truly every child learning according to his or her path. One of the beauties of a Montessori classroom, and certainly we would say a Jewish Montessori classroom, is the teacher's ability to provide differentiated instruction or learning that is appropriate for each and every child in a way that makes the most sense and is most engaging for them naturally. In another classroom environment, essentially everybody is being taught the same thing at the same time, but organically in a Montessori classroom, children are encouraged to decide for themselves what they'd like to look at and engage with at any given moment. So you'll walk into a classroom, and this is true for early childhood all the way through middle school, and you'll find children who are deciding for themselves what they'd like to take off of a variety of shelves, take it either to a table or to the floor, and use that material in a way that essentially they're teaching themselves. They know how to use it because they've been given perhaps a small group lesson or an individual lesson in how to use that material. But by reinforcing the work and repeating it, they're actually mastering that particular thing. And at any given moment, you might find some children working on English language, some children working on Hebrew, some children working on math, some children working on their sensorial materials to reinforce the senses, some children working on Chumash, some children working on Torah Shebaal Peh, and some children working in the sciences or geography. So it's really this beautiful, industrious village of activity going on in the classroom at any given time. And it's exhilarating to walk into an environment like that. There's a buzz of activity in the Jewish Montessori classroom. There isn't someone speaking in a frontal way and instructing children in rows of chairs. There's movement, and there's activity, and there's excitement, and there's discovery. And sometimes students are working together as partners. And sometimes students are working individually, and sometimes they're working in small groups. But throughout the classroom, you can sense that there is not just an excitement about what they're doing, but also a certain tranquility, because they're doing something that fulfills a need in themselves, and they're working on something that they are drawn to at that given moment. Movement is another really important part of the educational experience here. Children are constantly moving about the classroom and also using their hands, so we are able to give them both gross motor experience and fine motor experience. And this is obviously important when they're very young for their development, but even as they get older, the idea of giving a child freedom of movement is really significant to their educational experience, especially those rambunctious young boys. If you look at their natural tendencies and what seems to be developmentally appropriate, the idea of limiting them to one space for long periods of time really seems not to make so much sense. But here in the Montessori environment, children move around as part of their educational experience. They also move their hands quite a bit. Maria Montessori said, "The hand guides the mind." And what we know today about the brain and how we acquire information and how the brain develops, we know that the movement of the hand is actually very important in the acquisition of knowledge. And so children are moving about the classroom, and they're also moving their hands in order to develop this information and to master the material that they're learning. Another really nice byproduct of the multi-age classroom is that children truly are allowed to develop at their own pace and to learn at their own pace. And so, for example, in our 3 to 6 program, there might be a 3-year-old who is ready to learn how to read, and because of the Montessori materials is given the opportunity to learn how to read. We might have another child who's 4.5 and is really just on the cusp of being ready to learn to read. Both of those children have their needs met in this environment, and all of the children in the 3 to 6 program are able to appreciate the strengths of their friends without becoming competitive and looking at one another in terms of what each child is up to and what they're able to do academically. You might have a child who, as a very young 3 to 6-year-old, is moving very quickly in math, but not as quickly in language, or vice versa. And so in these beautiful multi-age classrooms, children are truly able to do the academic work that they're capable of and move along at their own pace, rather than impose a set of benchmarks on children externally and make expectations for what every child should achieve at every specific age. We understand that children develop differently. All children are different. And so some children may be reading when they first enter the 3 to 6 program, and some children may be reading or just emergent readers as they leave the 3 to 6 program. And there's room given for all of those children to thrive and succeed and be proud of what they're doing. Something that people in the education community talk about a lot right now is project-based learning or inquiry-based learning. And again, this is something that is inherent in Montessori education and something that we're very proud of and that we see taking place in our classrooms all the time. So, for example, if a student is interested in any particular area, discipline in the classroom, it's something that we can find materials, or the teacher will guide them to materials so that they can actually interact with real things and make discoveries for themselves. It might be as simple as sticks out of which the students make triangles, and I can remember on one occasion a group of lower elementary or 1st through 3rd graders coming to a teacher and saying, "Well, does every triangle tally up to 180 degrees? And the teacher said, "Go and find out for yourself." So those students went and they used our stick box and made myriad triangles in order to decide whether all of those triangles would amount to 180 degrees, and lo and behold, they did. And so those children actually explored with their own hands and discovered for themselves something that in another school a teacher might have just told them. We want our children to believe things because they themselves have discovered it to be true. Another exciting topic in education today is the idea of integration, that all of the different disciplines can and should, in fact, mesh with one another and somehow become linked to one another, and that this would be an ideal way to educate children so that there's context for what they're learning. Well, in a Montessori classroom and in our Montessori yeshiva, integration happens all the time. We have our Jewish teachers and our general studies teachers here at all times so that children are able to interact with whatever materials and whatever subject areas excite them at any given moment. And we allow them to piggyback one subject off of another. So, for example, when we are teaching gematria, Hebrew numerology, initially, we use Montessori math materials, concrete materials, to show what those letters would amount to. When we teach about giving tzedakah and we want children to understand the idea of a tenth of maaser, giving a tenth of one's earnings, we use the Montessori metal inset fractions to show children what a tenth is. At all times, there are things in the classroom that allow both the general and Jewish studies side to complement one another and to integrate with one another. In some of the most exciting work that has been done in our classrooms, children really use elements of various parts of the curriculum to complement others. So, for example, at Hanukkah time, when our children are studying the miracle of light, we're also teaching them the science behind light, and they might go visit Thomas Edison's laboratory to learn about his experiments with the light bulb. We've adapted all of the techniques and materials used in general non-sectarian Montessori schools to present our information in Hebrew language and Jewish studies. So all of the wonderful concrete materials that are used for language study in English are mirrored in the Hebrew language areas of our classrooms. Sandpaper sounds, movable alphabet, all of these wonderful techniques that are given to children to help them first learn to write and then to read are also available in Hebrew language. And in Jewish studies, all of the wonderful things that we use in general studies also appear. Things like miniature objects and tactile materials, card matching sets. All of these things are implemented in Judaic studies as well, so that the experience in our classroom is a very holistic and integrated educational experience. One of the most amazing cornerstones of Montessori education is the movement from the concrete to the abstract. We give children concrete materials that allow them to create a conceptual understanding of things before they move to the abstract. For example, in mathematics, where they use a variety of bead materials and they can actually see ones and tens and hundreds and thousands in the concrete before they move to paper. And we use that kind of material before the movement to paper in all of our curricular areas. Another important facet of our environment is something we call practical life, in which children are given the tools and the skills to essentially control their own environment, the way that we would expect an adult to be able to do. We give those opportunities to children, and this can be incredibly rewarding to them and really build their sense of self-confidence and their self-concept. So, for example, children are preparing food for themselves, even in our toddler program. They are peeling and cutting and slicing and pouring and preparing food for themselves, which gives them a tremendous amount of pride. And one of the other beautiful things that you'll see in a Montessori classroom is that not only do they prepare this food for themselves, they'll also then go about the classroom asking their friends if they would care for some. Again, one of the beautiful ways in which this kind of experience gives children the sense of care for others and a very strong responsibility to community. Another hallmark of Montessori education, and part of what we love about being the Montessori Yeshiva, children are able to evaluate for themselves how they're doing, and the success and mastery of any given subject area is its own reward. Children understand when they're building their own knowledge and their own mastery of material, and children are able to decide for themselves when they have succeeded in something. This gives us the ability to truly cultivate what we would call learning Torah lishma, for its own sake. Children who are learning not just Judaic studies, but also all of their general studies for the sake of learning. And in this way, we allow our children to maintain their natural curiosity. They go through their years here continuing that love of learning that we see initially when children are very small. They continue to have a thirst for knowledge, and they develop that sense of inquiry, which will serve them so well later in life, because they're not being given an external indicator of how they've done. They're actually driven to continue learning because when they get here, that's really what they crave. They desire to learn. Children come into this world wanting to learn. And when you give them a prepared environment with all of these wonderful materials and the ability to interact with the things in their environment so that they're naturally exploring and learning things, they never lose that love. They always have that desire to learn. And so truly it becomes Torah Lishma. Another beautiful thing about this system of education is the multi-age grouping. All of our classrooms have more than one grade level together, so it might be 3 to 6-year-olds, 6 to 9-year-olds, 9 to 12-year-olds. And the wonderful thing about this way of teaching is that all of the children in this system have a role to play and begin as the youngest learners and the people who are coming in not knowing exactly what to expect from that level, and the oldest children are the leaders and the role models. It becomes a very nurturing, very affectionate kind of community in which the oldest friends are caring for their younger friends and understand that it's their job to lead the way and to set an example. Sometimes you'll even find those older children speaking to the younger children and saying something like, "May I give you a lesson in this?" And it's a really wonderful and inspiring thing to see the type of care that they develop for their younger peers. The younger children, of course, come into an environment where they are cared for and they feel safe because they understand that there are people there to show them the way. And of course the people in that middle year are somewhere in between, learning how to move from being the child that is cared for and to become the child that gives the nurturing and fostering. So we believe that this is one of the ways in which the melding of Montessori and Yeshiva allows for children to become people with great midot, with tremendous menschlichkeit, and an understanding of what it means to be a part of a community and to take responsibility for others. The beauty of a Montessori Yeshiva experience is that it truly nurtures the whole child, whether it be academic or social, emotional, religious in this case, the spiritual side. All of these things are elements that our teachers are attuned to and seek to foster the child in developing. So we're really looking at the whole child and all of the ways in which they interact with their environment in the classroom allow them to become really fully integrated human beings, to think about the different subject areas as complements to one another and interacting with one another. The way that they look at the world is a whole person way of looking at the world, understanding the interconnectedness of all things, as Maria Montessori would say. We strive to produce small people who can go out into the world with that kind of integrated, holistic outlook. And we believe that in giving them this type of educational experience, we're really setting them up to be the most successful whole people they can be.